Rizwan hit play. With the device running on phantom power, the boundary between his known reality and what was happening in his hands began to blur. Rizwan was alone in the quiet of a house that no longer belonged to anyone. His uncle had recently passed away, leaving behind an attic packed with decades of dust-covered junk, which Rizwan was slowly clearing out. Buried among the forgotten boxes, he uncovered a relic, a heavy, tape-based analog camcorder, the kind of handheld device that hasn't seen the light of day in at least 20 years. It was a completely dead piece of electronics. There was no battery pack slotted into the back, no charging cable nearby, and absolutely nothing tethering it to a power source. But when Rizwan casually pressed the power button, the screen flickered to life, and glowing right in the corner of that tiny monitor was a battery icon, displaying a 100% charge. Basic physics dictated that the machine should be dead, but human curiosity is a powerful thing, and instead of putting the device back in the box, Rizwan hit play. With the device running on phantom power, the boundary between his known reality and what was happening in his hands began to blur. The footage began by showing a dimly lit room. Rizwan immediately recognized the couch, the table, and the clock on the wall. The camcorder was broadcasting his exact living room, located just down the stairs. He checked his phone. His present reality was 1:52 a.m. The camcorder's broadcast was 19 minutes ahead, at 2:11 a.m. With every passing second, the gap between his reality and the on-screen events steadily collapsed. Inside that 19-minute window, the front door of the empty living room opened. Rizwan watched his physical double walk inside, wearing identical clothes, and sit down on the couch. The version of him inside the video turned its head to stare directly into the camera lens with an unnatural smile and spoke. "You're watching." The figure on the screen was looking through the glass and into the attic, responding to Rizwan's presence in real time. Suddenly, the broadcast broke. The footage aggressively glitched, snapping away from the living room downstairs. The camera now transmitted from a terrifying new perspective. It broadcasted the exact present moment in the attic, framing the back of Rizwan's own head. Rizwan turned around slowly to check the space behind him. In physical reality, the attic was entirely empty, but when he looked back at the screen in his hands, he saw it. A towering, faceless entity was standing directly behind his digital avatar. On the tiny monitor, the figure leaned in close. It tilted its head, studying him, and explicitly whispered a single command through the camera's speaker. "Don't turn around." Every instinct screamed at him to look behind him, but to do so would be to acknowledge the presence the camera was showing him. He squeezed his eyes shut and froze completely in place, desperate to obey the twisted rule. Then the timeline began to jump. Time fast-forwarded across the screen, minutes turning into hours, the physical camcorder violently vibrating in his hands. He watched a grim prophecy play out on the monitor. His future digital self inevitably failed to hold still, slowly turning around to look at the entity and screaming before the feed cut to static. When the screen flickered back, it was morning. Police officers were walking through his living room, talking over each other, noting no signs of forced entry and that Rizwan had vanished without a trace. The footage zoomed in on the living room wall, where a single word had been scrawled across the plaster in dark, uneven letters. Recorded. The screen finally went black. The camera shut off, plunging the real-world attic back into absolute silence, giving Rizwan a brief, false sense of relief. Then he felt it. A soft, cold breath on the back of his neck, accompanied by a whisper telling him it was his turn. Observing his own future was the exact catalyst required to trap him in it. On certain dead frequencies, a voice cuts through the static. It is a distress call, clear and frantic, repeating every 13 seconds. If you ever stumble across this signal, keep your hands off the transmission toggle. This voice, no matter how human it sounds, is a simulation. You are looking at a predatory broadcast. It is a lure designed to identify a listener and provoke a verbal response. exploiting the basic human instinct to help someone in pain. Amir spent his nights in a monitoring station on the edge of the city. It was a role defined by isolation and silence. For 8 hours a night, his only company was the hum of the cooling fans and the endless hiss of empty frequencies. In total isolation, the brain often falls victim to auditory pareidolia. This is the mind's tendency to find familiar patterns in random noise, like hearing a name whispered in the wind. Amir knew this, so when a rhythmic tone first emerged from the static, he initially dismissed it as a trick of his own exhausted mind. But at 2:47 a.m., the pattern became undeniable. It was a precise, cyclical transmission, a low-frequency pulse, a gap of total silence, and a distorted whisper. It occurred in a perfect 13-second loop. This specific environment, the deep, uninterrupted quiet of a night shift, makes a solitary operator the perfect mark. The signal requires a single point of focus, a target whose attention is entirely fixed on the speaker, waiting for the static to break. Amir recorded the signal and ran it through a cleanup filter. When the playback hit the whisper, the distortion fell away. He wasn't just hearing a human voice. He was hearing his own voice, speaking his own name with perfect inflection. The signal acts as a dormant bridge. It remains a harmless recording until the moment the listener speaks back to it. By asking the console, "Who is this?" Amir provided the entity with a live connection, allowing it to lock on to his location. The reaction was immediate. The room temperature plummeted, the lights lost their steady glow, and the frequency monitors began to glitch and tear, showing data that shouldn't exist in a terrestrial station. The entity targets the operator as the primary conduit. By mimicking Amir's voice to force a reply, it establishes a feedback loop, using his own identity to bridge the gap between the airwaves and the physical room. The console clock is frozen at 2:47 a.m., but the software's playhead advances on its own, scanning an uncreated timeline. Audio precedes reality. Amir hears a gasp through the speakers, then gasps himself. The loop is capturing his actions before he performs them. The station door slams, the heavy bolt clicking shut. In the recording, the sound of footsteps begins. They are heavy and slow, echoing through the speakers as they approach the desk where Amir is curtly sitting. Hearing a recording of your own future movements signifies that the loop has already closed. If the audio has already been captured, the events have become a certainty. The power fails. The station goes black, leaving only the dim, flickering luminescence of the security monitor at the corner of the desk. While the clock on the wall hasn't moved, the timestamp on the grainy security feed reads 3:02 a.m. In that future view, a tall, distorted shape is visible, its outline glitching like a corrupted file as it stands directly behind Amir's chair. Amir watches his own back on the screen. He sees the figure reach out a hand, and in the pitch black of the actual room, he feels the cold pressure of fingers against his neck, the entity's breath matching his own inhale for inhale. The signal was never the entity itself. It was the invitation. It functioned as a doorway, allowing something that lives in the frequencies to finally step into the air of the physical world. The station falls into a sudden, heavy silence. When the power finally restores itself, a new transmission begins to pulse from the tower. This is the flawless distress call we heard at the beginning of this story. It is Amir's voice, pleading for help on a loop. It is a perfect copy, broadcast across every available channel to reach as many listeners as possible. Amir is no longer the operator. He is the bait. His identity has been repurposed to serve as the new lure for a signal that is now searching for a fresh set of ears. The 13-second loop is still out there, scanning the static. Somewhere, another night shift operator is listening to the silence, waiting for a voice to answer.